In a world of relentless change, cutthroat competition, and an evolving workforce, the secret weapon is extraordinary leadership. Now, this isn't a new technology or strategy, it's a long overlooked human trait: radical humility. Through a remarkable 35-year journey as a UN peacekeeper, best-selling author, keynote speaker, professor, ultra endurance champion, and veteran executive coach, Urs Koenig has honed a leadership philosophy that transforms how leaders tackle today's most pressing challenges. By placing radical humility at the heart of leadership, he emphasizes the power of self-awareness, psychological safety, and fostering a sense of belonging while driving exceptional business results. Urs, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Tara. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yes. So, you've got this amazing book, over 100 reviews on Amazon. I think 117 reviews. Amazing success on this book. It's phenomenally, just beautifully written. Every page, too, is designed so well. I just want to point that out. It's like a masterpiece. But, you've got this amazing career. The last time I talked to you, you were skiing in the Swiss Alps. Can't make this stuff up, right? And now here you are today in Seattle. It's early in the morning for you. You're speaking on stages around the world. Again, this amazing book. So I want to talk a little bit about everything that you've got going on right now, because it's really amazing.
Well, thank you. Yes, it's a lot going on right now, and you're right. I'm super thankful for how well my book has been received. It came out in March, and it's really given me more of a platform, which I'm super humbled by and thankful for, to talk about exactly that, the importance of humility in leadership. So right now I'm very busy traveling the globe, speaking to audiences, anything from healthcare professionals to, I was talking to painters last week, actually. So, and the beauty is that the message lands no matter if you have 75% of the audience being PhDs or none. So, and I'm very thankful for that.
Wow. Humility.
Right.
It's not really something we hear about a lot, right? This is the age of AI. This is the age of tech. This is the age of new gadgets every 5 seconds. You can't even keep up. And here we are talking about humility and leadership. Now, these are old principles, right, Urs? I just want to touch on that because I think it's time we go back to some of the old things a little
Yes,
bit.
exactly. Back to first principles. So look, maybe very briefly, and we'll obviously can talk more about what I exactly mean by radical humility in leadership. But it's foundationally a more relational view of leading my people. So instead of just leading by content or expertise, it's a more relational approach. And I would argue, and I'm not the only one, that in a world that's moving faster than ever, AI, that's something we constantly talk about. What AI will never be able to replace is the personal connection, the depth of relationship we can build with our people. And that is, what is so important today if we want to really propel our workforce forward. So yes, it's, a very old principle, and it has, been around for a long time, and yet it's been hugely undervalued in leadership. But I actually see it making a comeback right now because exactly of the faster moving world than we ever have had.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I'm sure everybody's kind of curious about this. You were a UN peacekeeper.
Yes.
I have to imagine that really impact the way you see leadership.
It absolutely does. So my journey is a bit unconventional. So I'm Swiss, and in Switzerland, we all have to serve. There's a national service model. So I served in the military in my 20s, and then I moved abroad. I've been away from Switzerland for over 35 years, but I actually went back at age 49 after having been out of the service for 23 years and re-enlisted to serve as a peacekeeper. I was in the NATO mission in the Balkans first, and then two and a half years ago now in the Middle East for the UN, as you stated earlier, as a peacekeeper. And you're absolutely correct, but it does shape how I think about leadership, but counterintuitively to some extent. People think, oh, the military, top-down, command control, just do the things I tell you to do because I say so. Not so much. The best commanders, the best bosses I've had in these peacekeeping missions are deeply humble leaders. They have deep self-awareness. They build psychological safety, all the things we don't think about, the military does well. And so absolutely, it's informed how I look at leadership. But then frankly, also on a more philosophical level, when you go into a conflict zone like that and you try to make an ever so small contribution, that in itself is a deeply humbling experience, and you realize how, small maybe my problems, my concerns really are compared to what's going on in some of these conflict zones. So it was really on a personal level, a deeply humbling experience as well.
I love that. When we're going through our own problems, they really feel like it's the end of the world. I like to, zoom out. So I think of this, the solar system that we're in, right? And our small place in this solar system. And then I think of the Milky Way galaxy, which we call home. It would take 200,000 light years just to cross our Milky Way galaxy. And then I go back and zoom back in on my little tiny itty bitty problems. And I say, you know what? Not so significant, right? But it's the same thing with when you're in a situation like a war zone. You think you have problems until you see families torn apart, innocent lives lost, war, famine, poverty, firsthand on the ground. It changes the way you think of life, doesn't it?
It really does. And you're absolutely correct. It puts things in perspective. At the same time, though, what's actually also really interesting is, I came back from these missions, and frankly, it didn't take me very long to get annoyed again at the traffic, or the TCA line is too long. So it's sort of interesting how we revert back into, and that's probably also healthy, because frankly, if we constantly carry the weight of the world on our shoulders, then that's a very heavy burden indeed. So yes, it certainly has had a lasting impact on me, and I have to still remind myself almost daily of what you just talked about. Like, is this really that bad? So we revert back to where we were before often.
Yes. Now, we're talking about leadership. How did this impact the way you serve? And not just the way you serve, but how you teach others to lead and serve?
So you mean specifically the experience serving in the UN?
Yeah, for any leadership, speech that you do, workshop that you facilitate.
So really, foundationally, the concept of leading with humility has, as I mentioned earlier, is relationally. But let me just maybe define it just super briefly. So it's first of all having deep self-awareness. So that's what people think of when they think of humility. I see myself accurately, not too high, and by the way, also not too low. Like, leading with humility does not mean, or being humble does not mean having a low self-esteem. It means I assess myself accurately. So I see myself accurately. And by the way, I have the humility to constantly ask for feedback. So Tara, how did I show up in that meeting? What could I have done better? What do you think went well? And so, quick aside here, we actually need to be fundamentally confident to show up with humility. There's sort of this seeming contradiction, but if I don't fundamentally have a strong sense of self, or confident in myself, in my strength, I won't be able to humbly ask for feedback because I'm afraid of what might come back, right? And so confidence and humility really go hand in hand. And by the way, also ambition and humility, because only if I ask the hard questions, like, why are we failing? Why is my business not as successful as it should be? And by the way, what's my part in this? Like, these are humble questions, but we need to ask them in order to achieve massive success, which of course is the definition of being ambitious. So anyway, so there's these contradictions seemingly that that actually are not true. So humility really goes hand in hand with being, as I write in my book, a badass leader. So it's this first piece of accurate self-awareness and seeing myself in line with how others see me. And then it's this piece I talked earlier about leading relationally. So not just by content expertise, but holding, and I call it tough on results, tender on people, holding my people to the highest standards while building meaningful and collaborative relationships with them. And I write about the story in the book where my commanding officer that was in the Balkans opens a meeting I had with him with these words. He said, Urs, I love you. You know I do. And your work is not even close to being good enough. So that's tough on results, tender on people. His words made me shrink in my chair. Why? Because I knew he actually did love me. Of course, he didn't just say that we had to build a relationship over the last 9 months, actually. If he would have yelled at me, I would have tuned him out. Oh, another high-ranking officer. But because he really showed me that he cared for me, I was able to hear his feedback. So this notion that if we're tender on people, it gives us license to be tough on results. If we've built meaningful and collaborative relationships with our team members, they'll be much more likely to be able to hear and act on our feedback. So that's the relational piece, one-on-one. And then you touched earlier on psychological safety. Of course, I'm leaning heavily on, the work by Amy Edmondson out of Harvard. So that's leading relationally on a team and organizational level, making it safe for everybody on my team to speak up with questions, concerns, crazy ideas, without fear of being shamed or worse, risking their career. And by the way, that is also, the soft stuff is not soft. The soft stuff is tough, right? So that's incredibly hard to actually to build and maintain. And yet all the research shows it's a ticket to success. If you want your team, your organization to thrive, a culture where it's safe for everybody to speak up, a fearless culture is the ticket to win. So self-awareness, one-on-one, tough on results, tender on people, and then organizational leadership, build a culture of psychological safety. So these are the 3 pillars of leading with radical humility.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Well, one of the most commonly asked questions I get is, how do I know I'm building confidence and not arrogance? And that's a good question. But, when we can lead with empathy, when we can lead with humility and still lead, right? Still be in charge, still be a leader, still show the way, still be the guiding light, but also be humble and authentic at the same time as empathetic. And you brought up something I preach as well with leadership, is to start every conversation with someone, regardless of how hard the conversation is, with an expression of gratitude. So in your instance, that person saying to you, I love you, I do, but, this isn't good enough.
Right.
You know what? It made you open and receptive. And in our brains, the way information comes into our brains, it first starts and goes into the base of our brains. That's not the logical thinking center, right?
Right.
And then it has to go through the trouble with traveling through our limbic system, which is the emotional center of our brains, before it gets to the prefrontal cortex, which is finally the rational center. So if you start a conversation with an expression of gratitude for that other person, that's the first thing it opens up the path, literally the path for receptivity. So where that other person is open to what you say, and you can be that leader, you can be that boss and tell that other person, hey, I expect more.
Absolutely.
But you start with an expression of gratitude, of love, right?
Absolutely. No, you're right on. And, and it's not just, and I'm sure you would agree, it's not just starting, but, consistently doing this over time, right? And so showing my team members that I truly am interested in them as whole people. And, we don't have to get too personal. And by the way, we don't need to bare our soul open to our teammates either. And that's not appropriate, certainly at times. But we will have different depth of relationships with different members of our team, and that's totally fine. But you brought up an excellent point, this difference between arrogance and confidence, right? And so I'm sure you have a lot to say about this, but my take on this is I am confident when I, again, have an accurate view of what I'm good at and where I need to improve. And I actually constantly strive to get better. And again, come back to asking for input and feedback from others. That's, to me, is confidence. Arrogance then is, I don't actually ask for feedback or input. I think I have all the answers. I need to be the smartest person in the room. I need my idea to win versus the best idea. So a confident leader can actually defer to his or her team because, they're confident enough. They don't need to constantly prove themselves. An arrogant leader needs to always be right and always their idea win because they need to have that ego stroked. And so I think it's a really important distinction you're making there, Tara.
Yes. And we see when we kind of define it a little bit, how vastly different they both are. Confidence has nothing to do with arrogance.
Absolutely.
They couldn't be farther apart, yet we associate them as equals in our minds. And this is so easy to see someone. Maybe we see someone online, maybe we see somebody on social media. They portray confidence, but is it actually arrogance? Or are they a confident, empathetic leader?
Right?
So we can see these differences through the actions of the individual. And kind of like what you were saying as well is that authentic confidence is just, it's extreme self-awareness. And you know yourself very well.
Exactly. So I maybe a quick anecdote. So during my peacekeeping mission to the Middle East, one of my commanding officers, she truly was very confident, but not arrogant. She opened an after-action review with these words. She said, I screwed that up and I know it. And here is what I'm going to do so it won't ever happen again. So her ability to go first, like model the sort of speaking up she wanted us to do, made it safe then for all of us to speak up. But again, she was fundamentally confident in her position as the leader of the whole team, in her ability to have content expertise, so she could actually admit that she messed up. So we need to be fundamentally confident in order to actually own our mistakes. And that, as we all know, builds huge trust. Our leaders actually admitting that they don't have all the answers. While they have strong expertise, they're also always striving to get better.
Exactly. I love that. Wow, that is so powerful. What would you say, a turning point for you? Was there a moment or a catalyst for change or transformation in your career or life that really helped this be readily and known and available to you, that you said, you know what, this is the answer? It's this humility. What can you take us back and tell us a little bit if there was something like that for you?
Absolutely. So maybe the humility piece, that was more a gradual discovery of the concept. I can talk about one specific, real turning point for me, but maybe just briefly the humility piece. I was always drawn to humble people. In my ultra endurance competition, I loved hanging with the folks who let their legs do the talking versus the big mouth in the ultra cycling world, for example. Like, these were my peeps. And, highly successful business leaders, clients who were amazing, but sort of achieved so many things and always strived to get better. So I was always drawn to humble folks. And then as I was an executive coach in the 2010s, and as sort of social media started to explode, we came out of the financial crisis, my clients always seemed a step behind, and a lot of them were still leading top-down command control, not very humble. And so that got me digging into this different way of leading. And then I discovered humility in leadership, discovered the amazing book by Ed Schein, one of the fathers of organizational development, on humble leadership. And that sort of got me digging into the importance of humility. But there was one specific turning point, Tara, that really made a huge impact on the rest of my career. So I talked about going back into the military. So lots of people ask me, like, why on earth would you do that at 49, right? And so the reason for that was that I was approaching, obviously, 50 at the time. My father, who was an incredibly important part of my life, passed away a few years earlier, and he actually was involved in international mission work. So he did UN election observation and a bunch of other humanitarian missions, and he had a really profound impact on me when he did that. He actually did it in when I was a teenager in the 80s as well, and then really got into it after he retired. So he passed away, and that really got me. That sounds a bit morbid, but like, there's no one ahead of me, and my runway is not endless either anymore. And I really looked at my life and I asked myself, what are the things I still want to do and experience? And doing meaningful international work was one of those things. And up to that point, I haven't done it. I was one of those people. Yeah, one day I will, and that's not me. So I had a good hard look and then decided to really pursue this peacekeeping, which, it now sounds great and wonderful, but it was incredibly difficult to get back into it after having been out for so long. Psych evaluations, physicals, role playing, the whole thing with the military, flying backwards and forwards. I had 2 young kids, or at that time. They're older now, so that was difficult as well. But I really felt so compelled to make my own small contribution towards a more peaceful, a better world, that I decided to basically uproot my life. Much like you, I had a coaching business. I was running my own show, so I needed to wind all that down and, rent out my house. I basically, stopped my life, and I was not 20 anymore. It was much more complex with kids and everything. So that was a real turning point. And it was incredibly difficult, but also highly fulfilling, of course. So yeah, that was one of those turning points.
Wow, that's amazing. When you were a UN peacekeeper, what was the hardest lesson you had to learn?
That's a great question, Tara. One of them, if it sounds so obvious, but if the 2 conflict parties don't really want to work towards peace, there's nothing I can do. There's nothing the peacekeeping force can do. So it's a humbling, sort of experiences as well. So that was, that was probably the most difficult, like often questioning, frankly, the value we were bringing, to be quite honest, like really. On a small scale, we were, greatly valued, the village speakers, the families we visited, the people we meet on the street. But I often questioned at the high level how much value we are really bringing, because do these 2 parties or 3 or 5 parties really want to work towards a more peaceful outcome? I'm not always sure that's the case.
Wow. That's hard.
Yeah, it's hard. What a downer at 7 a.m. in the morning, Tara. But no, that's the truth, right? It sounds like, but look, it's, I still believe it's noble work, what we do. And frankly, also on a personal level, just so fulfilling. All the wonderful experiences I got to have working in a multinational force, seeing the appreciation of the folks on the ground, and that fuels you. So it's, and by the way, it's not dissimilar to a lot of what a lot of our clients and, your listeners and viewers view. Sometimes you don't agree with the big picture of what your organization is doing. You might not even really buy into the overall vision of what your organization, your business is all about. But you can make a difference with your immediate team. You can really make a difference with your team and, create your own little pocket of excellence, however that looks like for you, right? So if you're a leader, let's create the best environment we can in our own small team, even if maybe we don't always agree with what's going on at the top.
So powerful. Even though you were in that situation sometimes and felt like, maybe it wasn't successful or as purposeful as you wanted it to, really, if it adds to your purpose, and teaches you something, and of course you're going to help someone else, right? Someone else One, even if it touches one person. And the ripple effect, you may not even see in your lifetime.
That's very true.
So I think about that. If you help a small child, they may one day remember when they're faced into a tough war-torn situation and given the option of killing their neighbor or not,
Right.
maybe they reference you.
Yeah.
And you know what? That makes me feel better just thinking about that even though what we perceive as a small impact could actually be very vast in nature. But you are such an inspiration. Holy cow. Like,
thank you.
I'm inspired. And, I'm 40 and I think, why me?
Right.
And you were 9 years older than me when you went back into the Army. I'm just thinking, how did he do it? God bless you for that. I mean, my gosh, that was not an easy decision.
It wasn't. No, and there's plenty of this. It was difficult, but it was also hilarious. Maybe just one quick anecdote. So, when you go and serve for the UN, you have to be able to drive an armored vehicle. And so, how do you learn to drive an armored vehicle? Well, they don't exactly, have the armored vehicle driving school here in the States or in Switzerland for that matter. So the closest you can get is you need to be able to drive a truck. And so I actually went back. This is, what is this now? 4 years ago. Yeah. I had to go back and get a commercial driver's license. I had to learn how to drive a truck. And so I had to take 3 weeks and go, this is in Seattle, drive an hour south every day for 8 hours, do truck driving lessons. And, I really don't want to come across as arrogant. I was, the only guy probably with a PhD in the room, which is, and I knew nothing about engines. And so all these guys, totally different background. That's again, a humbling experience. Such a different life experience, different life path. And we were, they could teach me. We were working on these trucks together. And anyway, in the end, I passed the truck driving test, which now means I can drive an armored vehicle. But the UN makes the condition that you need to be able to drive a truck. So I did. I learned how to drive a truck in 3 weeks.
Oh my gosh. It doesn't stop.
Exactly.
You get a PhD and then learn how to become a truck driver. What a different career path you have had. Exactly. I love it. Yes, this is like for anybody who wants to change career, listen to this episode.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't, actually, there is an important lesson in there, actually. So, learning something that's very uncomfortable for you or for anybody, like that is such a wonderful way on how to learn to fail in inverted commas on a small scale and be more comfortable and learn a growth mindset, right? So go and start literally have a hobby or start a hobby or something that you thought or you think might interest you, but you might really suck at it. Ballroom dancing, improv. I do improv, and it's hard. It's great as a keynote speaker, but it's an incredibly humbling skill. So when you push yourself in an area where it's safe, in a hobby, not professionally, you do stuff that is uncomfortable, it really teaches you to sort of embrace the growth mindset and learn to fail on a small scale. So truck driving was certainly one of those things, way out of my comfort zone, way out of it.
I can't even imagine that. I love that. Well, what an enlightening conversation. I took away so many nuggets from this one episode. But I have to ask you one final question. All of these life experiences that you've had, who did this help you become?
What does it help me become? I think that I have become much clearer around what really is important. It sounds like a cliche, I realize that, but what really is important to me and what drives me. And by the way, I'm still work in progress. So I'm not there yet and I haven't become it yet. So I'm still traveling towards it. But this notion of making a difference for myself and others, seeing people moved, not just intellectually, but emotionally, and helping others towards a more human-centered, relationally driven approach in their, not just leadership, but their life. Like that is so much more important to me than, yes, the accolades are great. Of course I like the applause after a keynote. Yes, the money is fine, whatever is good, whatever. But honestly, like, it really doesn't drive me. What drives me is what you talked earlier, the impact I can make one-on-one with a small group and see that ripple effect. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but that is what has become so much clearer to me, what really is important to me and what drives me. And I'm actually, I'm giving away all my business revenue to good causes. So my speaking revenue, my book royalties, for that matter, like, it doesn't, I have enough, it's fine, I don't need more, but I want to make a real difference. And so that's my life experience has helped me to come to this place, and it's evolving. We have this conversation in 2 months or 5 years, my answer might be different. So there you have it.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, he says he's a work in progress, yet he has a PhD, a best-selling book. He's an international keynote speaker and a truck driver.
That's right.
If he's a work in progress, we're all a work in progress, right? And it's all about that radical humility in leadership, and it starts with self. Urs, thank you so much for being a guest on this show today and making this a remarkable podcast. And thank you so much, everyone who listened, downloaded, liked, subscribed, and shared, and left a review. We appreciate every single one, and we love hearing from our listeners and friends. So don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment on this show. Let us know if you want Urs back again. I think I do. Anyway, thank you so much, Urs. It has been a pleasure, my friend.
Thanks so much. Great fun.
Bye.